And what is up, peeps? Welcome to After Hours. We are back again tonight. Happy Thursday. I was excited for everyone who joined earlier in live. Thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for working with us through our technical difficulties earlier as well. But we got those issues fixed now. So shout out to you guys, man. Happy Thursday night. I will be joined here on our show shortly by Dan, aka Knight Lucas, aka the Lore Master, in my opinion, and OG J House co-host, my buddy, best friend, Evan Elliott will be joined here in a few short moments. But tonight we're getting into the huge, talking about all of this controversy going on. Dan and Evan bring new perspectives to bear on this acolyte situation, as have so many people in the Star Wars community, from the most prominent even to the most passionate. Everyone has had something to say on this subject of Star Wars, and we're gonna get into a lot more too. So shout out to you guys. Happy freaking Thursday. So we're in here making it happen. So hope you guys are doing great. And so I've been catching some slack so much around our IG lives concerning the acolyte, concerning what is canon, what was the issue necessarily when people were concerned with the controversy. So we're going to get into that. But firstly, I do want to say I was accused of of saying that I'm a superior fan, and which I'm really not. I'm a OG fan. Uh, in terms of being a prequel fan because I grew up on the prequels and then ended up going being able, I would say, being blessed to be able to experience both Clone Wars canons. So I think that lends credibility to itself. Someone being able to grow up with these two Clone Wars shows and the vast, and then be able to explore the original trilogy too. So you know there's that as well, and so I think that means a lot, and I'm not the only one. There's so many other people that have done that. So many other people that have been through this before. So I think that it's something to experience. What's up, buddy? Got my boys with me here on the late night. Two infant boys. They are asleep at the moment. And I got my buddy Asher. He wants to tell you guys hi.
Hi.
Tell them don't forget to subscribe.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Yep. There we go. All right, go watch X Men. He's watching X Men right now. He's on a big X Men binge. Absolutely loves the X Men. That's his show right now. We got to watch 97, and we also are making our way.
Belongs in X-Men.
Yes, Storm belongs in X Men. That is right. That's right.
She's the one that lost her powers next week.
I know. She got him back, though. She got him back.
Yeah.
All right, go watch TV.
But Wolverine sticks everybody.
Yes, he does. He's got the fundamentals down. He's got the fundamentals down. We are joined by special guest Knight Lucas, aka Dan. So shout out to my boy Dan.
Hi again.
Asher. And what is up, buddy? How you doing?
You can
I'm
say
good. How you
hi
doing? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, man. I'm doing all right. I'm doing pretty good.
Yeah, that brought a smile to my face.
But
Yeah.
yeah, now we're waiting on Evan to get in. But man, such a great perspective we had earlier going on the acolyte, and I think the situation is a lot more complex than people will admit. But we're gonna get into that too as well tonight with Evan. So waiting on him to get in. But yeah, we're gonna make it happen. But yeah, Dan, introduce yourself to the people, and I'm gonna turn off my camera for a quick second.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm Knight Lucas. I'm a fan, and I love the lore. Well, I love many versions of the lore. Being a fanatic when it comes to not just Star Wars, but many things, but mainly just Star Wars. I don't really have much to say about myself, more or less at the moment. But who knows? As this conversation continues, I'll probably let some things slip out. I'm kind of like that.
All right, bud. Thanks for your intro, and we're still waiting on Evan to get in, so
It
waiting
shouldn't
on
take
him.
me. Well,
But yeah,
maybe it'll take him a while. That's all. It's okay.
yeah, it'd be like that sometimes, but it's all good.
Hey,
But
that Evan. We talked to him during the Anakin Skywalker debate, right?
yeah, Evan's been my co-host for quite a while.
Wow, that's nice.
He's been with me since the beginning. We started this thing together uh, in our theater class back when I was in college,
Wow.
and that's where we linked up. And he happened to be just as much of a nerd as I was, and here we are through life and all that, just rocking with it, no matter what. So
Nice.
yeah, it's an awesome thing, man. It's an awesome thing, and now we're here. Now we're making it happen. So super excited, man. Super excited. But man, the acolyte has brought out the most. I think the most animosity I've seen between fans in so long, just because of things that are not. Yeah, it is. Just because of so many things that people can't really talk about. I guess because people are afraid of the reactions or
Mm-hmm.
getting down to the core issues of what's really going on. But
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't be that way. But it is because
Yeah.
it's Star Wars is owned by Disney, and Disney is a company that is in the business of making money, and they do that by any means necessary. They do that, you know, by just they call it giving the fans what they want, and maybe in some cases they do that. Maybe they do that. I think they do that with the MCU a lot more so than anything. But
Yeah.
when it comes to everything else, I don't think that that's the case, especially not with Star Wars. But you know, you can't take back what's been done. We can't take back you know, what's been done with the sequels, and so this is what we have, and this is where we are, and people are having to deal with that fact. So, you know, I don't know what to tell people other than, I mean, people are going to disagree about this. You knew the consequences going into this. You knew what it would mean to make certain storytelling decisions, and they know this too. The writers are active in this. They know this. They know the backlash that they're going to get, and they make these certain choices anyway. So it is what it is, and if you want to go touch grass about it, then that's fine. Go do that. But there's still many people on here who are never going to let this slide because they're just so passionate about the franchise, which is perfectly fine. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think anybody should be ashamed for being passionate. I don't condone the behavior and the death threats and things of that nature. I definitely don't condone that. But I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, well, if you don't like Star Wars, then don't watch it. If you don't like this, then don't watch it. It's easy for you to say when you've only been a fan for maybe 5 years, as opposed to someone who's been a fan for a long time, basically their entire life. And so it's kind of hard for people to walk away from that when you just tell people, oh, well, Star Wars isn't for you anymore. That's not right. I don't think that's the right attitude to have, and I've tried to compromise with people as best I could. I've tried to see the middle ground in there too, and give recognition to some things that I like about Disney Star Wars while also being fair in criticism to what I don't like. But at the same time, it's never going to be. I don't think we're not going to see Star Wars fans really be happy and united again for a while. And if they did, it would take a massive. Now they're in too deep. Now Disney's way in too deep with this thing. They've made their plans and they're not going to quit. So I think that people call for a reboot. People say reboot, 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 or soft reboot or whatever, and I'm like, well, maybe. I'm never gonna say never, but I mean, this is Star Wars, and the story is so iconic. What gets done to that story is done, and you can't really take it back. You know what I'm saying? So, uh, that's just where I'm at as far as the acolyte, and as far as what's being put out right now. Am I now my mind has obviously changed since then for a while. Am I gonna be there for Ahsoka season 2? In my heart, I want to be, because I loved Ahsoka. I love the character, and I thought the show was great. In my heart, I do. I'm not gonna know until we get there for real. But for now, I just sort of feel like, well, what's the point in watching the acolyte? You know. But I'm staying tuned bit by bit, just to stay in there as much as I can, as tolerable as it can be. So that's just where I'm at. I don't know where you stand with Star Wars, Dan, and what's your current standing with Star Wars, period, or how you're feeling.
Oh well, my feelings are actually quite simple, which I've expressed quite vividly. I think even to you. I only want one thing out of Star Wars now: George Lucas's sequel trilogy. That is it. Like there was a point with like you where I was like, find the middle ground. Or sorry, there was a point where I was like, fight the other because they're ruining everything. Then I transferred to find the middle ground. Try to see both sides, make fairness, all that stuff. And now I'm just like, okay, here's what I want out of this because this is what I've wanted this entire time, and I'm completely fine with everything else. Let the chaos happen. Let the city burn. I have, I think my point of giving up on Disney Star Wars finding its footing was Kenobi. And it's something my friend told me. My friend Curtis, he said, look, if they can't get an Obi-Wan show right, they don't know what they're doing. I was like, you know what? I agree with that. Well, they didn't get it right. And I already knew from then that the damage Disney Star Wars had inflicted on their own canon had been done. Now, I do have solutions in mind towards fixing Star Wars in its current state, which I have expressed also very vividly. But honestly, despite me having those ideas in my head of how you can like solve things and make things work for the entire fandom, at this point, I'm not saying you can't still fix it with the ideas I have. I'm just saying, honestly, would it matter? Because even if my ideas were imported into their plan and they did fix things, there would still be scars, and some people are just done for good. They've burned bridges, you know?
Yeah, bridges burned, and
Don't forget Wolverine.
we haven't forgotten Wolverine, buddy.
I love me some Wolverine. That's an awesome character.
We have not forgotten Wolverine, Asher.
No, sir. After Deadpool 3, no one's gonna forget Wolverine ever again.
Magneto.
Yeah. He says, don't forget any of the X-Men characters. Not even Magneto. Don't even forget Magneto. Not for a second. Don't even.
Your son really does love X-Men, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I can't put him on like Disney's like children's Star Wars. I can't put him on that stuff. So there's only like certain things that I can put him on.
Well, you
I
don't
let
want
him.
to show him the Padawan cartoon, the one that takes place during the High Republic. I wasn't okay. Here's the thing: I wasn't that into it, but I
Yeah,
watched a couple episodes. I was like, you know what? If I was like a really little kid, I'd probably like this. But it's like the High Republic era as a fan to me is so bad that I don't think I can stomach watching a show for junior kids about an era that I already don't like.
I think that's part of the acolytes problem overall. It's just like you're talking about an era that's not selling that well. You know
No,
what I'm saying? And that's what people are talking about. You're talking about an era that's not really selling that well, and that people are not interested in like that. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it
so
ain't a
how
problem, Eric. People like you, we read books. I read books. We read the Star Wars books. We
I
do it.
I do, but I only have like the first two. I got Light of the Jedi, and then I got the second book after that. Those are the only two
See,
High Republic. I
see,
bought them.
there's
I
the
bought
proof.
them because I thought they were going to be good.
Yes.
Or that I would be interested. But I was wrong. I
Look,
guess I
Eric,
was
look,
wrong.
look at it this way, man. All right. You buy books, I buy books. Heck, I bought some High Republic books and started reading them before I dropped off from it when I learned about the Sentient Rock. That was my turning off point. But here's the thing, man. They're
Yeah.
not marketing these books towards people that read books. They're marketing them towards people who don't aren't into reading. They're into scrolling. They're into internet stuff. Like they're like the issue with Disney Star Wars and the MCU. Like one of the issues with Disney's products is they are using nostalgia to pull in people like us, which they don't give us, good nostalgia, just nostalgia. And they're using, they have a dominant customer base in mind, which is the niche audience of people today that aren't into these franchises and can only find some interest in them if these franchises are changed to suit, their interests.
Hmm. Right.
That's the truth, man. So these people, they're not gonna buy all the High Republic books. They're not gonna do that. You know, if they wrote them well, you and me would probably have like our own homes would be filled with High Republic books, an entire archive, a library. But we're not the demographic. It's these people who don't read. So it's maybe they should have tried to I don't know, make what internet books, like comics, like these people they read those. I know they read that. If they tried to market the High Republic that way, they probably could have gotten that niche fan base. Maybe, I don't know.
Maybe I don't know because Disney put all the money that they could into multimedia projects from books to um, movie game appearances more so, but mainly the books and the comics. The High Republic put a lot of work into. Did they
Yeah,
have the right story group for it? Maybe not, but you know that's just me.
you know
Because
what would have been smarter, man?
what's
Take
that?
all these books and comics they make, turn them into movies and shows. I'm not saying that these movies and shows would have been successful automatically, but considering the target demographic they're going for doesn't read, it would be smart to adapt all of their written works into visual medium for them to view instead of just, making an era that's mostly done in books that these people aren't going to read.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Because back when it was before Disney bought them, I thought Lucasfilm and the company was doing a pretty good job. They had a little bit of media across everywhere, from Knights of the Old Republic to the books. They had a little bit. They had a little bit of everything going. So I didn't
Mhm.
think it was that bad before then.
It was better than this. I wouldn't say it was great, but you know.
Yeah, it was better. It was better. I even said that I enjoyed the Vader comics that Disney put out. The Vader comics were
The
not.
Vader comics are the best thing to come out of Disney Star Wars, well, modern Disney Star Wars. But yeah, I agree with you.
Hear this, brother. I just saw this on the timeline via Star Wars Holocron. Uh, According to an interview via SiriusXM, Sharmina Bay Chinoy has consulted with George Lucas, Dave Filoni, and J.J. Abrams about her upcoming new Jedi Order movie with Rey. She says, I've had conversations with J.J., I've had conversations with George, and of course Dave Filoni, who is a big part of the Star Wars universe now. We speak very often, and Kathleen Kennedy, Carrie Beck, and Simon Emanuel, I think the team is really taking time to make sure that we do justice to telling the story of Rey. Now, doesn't that just put a bumper in what I've been saying about the Rey movie since then? Don't give me hope, as Hawkeye would say. Don't give me hope.
I don't have any, and
Don't
like,
don't give me hope.
you know what they said? You're doing the Hawkeye thing for game. You know what they said about the Rise of Skywalker when there was promotion for that.
What's that?
They said they called George Lucas in to get young notes on the movie. And I was ecstatic, jumping up and down. Oh my God, they're getting George involved, and he's gonna, call him in, give them his advice, and like we're gonna get like maybe a better Star Wars movie than The Last Jedi. And The Rise of Skywalker came out, and you know what we got. Now, am I saying that they're not listening to Lucas at all, and they're not taking his notes? They're not listening to Filoni. They're not listening to J.J. Abrams. They're not listening to all these guys. I'm not saying they're not listening to them, but here's the thing: Lucas made it clear in that Kane's interview, I think in France, that he's retired. He's not running Lucasfilm anymore. He's made it clear that when it comes to their content and stuff, he's moved on. He's accepted the fact that, they are going in a different direction than what he intended, which he's admitted multiple times. They're going in a different direction than what he's intended. Dave Filoni is a team player. And what I mean by Dave Filoni is a team player, I mean, whether Dave Filoni agrees with the direction of Disney Star Wars or not, he is going to work with the company as they want him to, because that's how he operates. When George hired Dave Filoni, one of the things George mentioned to Dave specifically was, I like you because you listen to me. So during the run of the Clone Wars, Dave Filoni, at the end of the day, regardless of what his opinions were on the direction of the show, just did what George Lucas wanted him to do. You want to know why the Mandalorians are pacifists in the Clone Wars show, and they're not pacifists in the EU? Well, that's because George Lucas told Dave Filoni, we're gonna explore the EU, we're gonna explore the Mandalorians in the Clone Wars. And Dave Filoni pulled out all this EU stuff, all these books he likes about the Mandalorians and the lore and all sorts of stuff. And George Lucas told him and the Clone Wars production crew two things that shocked them. One, that in his world, in his canon, which is a parallel universe to the EU, vice versa, Boba Fett and Jango Fett aren't Mandalorians. They're just criminals. Jango Fett got his hands on the armor in some criminal way. And another thing he told Dave Filoni was that the Mandalorians around this era of the Clone Wars are pacifists. And one of the things Dave Filoni said was, I don't think a lot of people will see it that way. And George says, well, cultures change over time. So the reason why I went into this small little, I guess, explanation is that if you, like, from what I understand, I've researched the production history behind all this stuff. I'm not here to get into bias about my opinions. Here's the truth. If Dave Filoni listened to everything George told him, regardless of how he personally felt about, the direction of the show and the ideas, what makes you think he's not going to listen to Kathleen Kennedy and anyone else in Disney Lucasfilm on the direction of where their company is going, whatever their plans are? I'm not even going to say the word agenda because I don't want to be controversial when I say this. I just want to be objective. Just want to be honest. Dave Filoni is going to do what they want him to do. And if he gets to like do what he wants to do, as a result, like, more Ahsoka stuff, more Rebel stuff, whatever he personally enjoys, he'll get to do that, and it works out swimmingly. J.J. Abrams, which, I've been very harsh on this man, so I'll be nice. J.J. Abrams is a great concept guy. He comes up with ideas. I wouldn't say he's the best writer out there. He's more of a technical person when it comes to filmmaking. And J.J. Abrams' only relevance, I think, to coming in and giving advice is basically the fact that he's worked on the sequel trilogy and two out of 3 films. And the irony is he realized his mistakes after the Rise of Skywalker released and failed. So if he's giving any advice to people working on the new Rey movie or whatever, I'm pretty sure, maybe he'll take maybe he'll take from his lessons and, give it to this new person, or maybe he'll just go along with what he did before. And I'm just going to be honest here. George Lucas is retired. Dave Filoni is a team player. J.J. Abrams is, well, I would say a man that's made many mistakes and has no proof or evidence of improving in any way. So think about that. Think about all those variables right there about these 3 men at this point in time when it comes to the new Rey movie. Do you honestly believe? I'm not saying it's impossible, but do you honestly believe, with all that information you just received, that there's any chance of this Rey movie being any better, even with them involved in any way? Smallest capacity at all? Biggest? Doesn't really matter?
You can keep going, Knight. My bad. I'm dealing with my kids right now.
Oh,
But
no, I made my point. That's
I'm listening.
Oh, do you want me to? Oh, okay. Oh, no, I said what I had to say. If you want me to say more, just ask. I'll do it.
At this point, I'm just waiting on Evan to get here.
Yeah, same here. I'm wondering where he is. It might take him a little while. I don't know.
Yeah, it just might. I'm not tripping on that.
Yeah.
But
so, yeah.
Are you gonna watch The Acolyte? Are you planning on watching it? Maybe.
I told you no. No. I made a vow when I watched those early premium whatever that I wouldn't watch it based on what the people behind the show feel about Star Wars. I feel like if you're gonna tell me Star Wars isn't about good and evil, and you're working on this Star Wars project, that Star Wars project isn't going to be that good. It's like that's how I see it. No ill will against them, even if I strongly disagree with how they see Star Wars. Just that good and evil are part of the core foundations of all of it. It's like it's not the only thing, but it's pretty up there. And to say that your Star Wars project isn't about that, as a fan who's known Star Wars that way for so long, I don't have a reason to view it. I don't think that means that no one will like it. Maybe someone out there will enjoy it. Well, good for them. It's not for me.
Yeah, that's fair. That's totally fair. I thought about watching episode 4 tonight. I thought about it.
But you're not going to do
it? I'll see if I can put it on the schedule. Maybe. If I get to it, I get to it. If I don't, I don't. Yeah. I'm just waiting to see what the next big thing is going to be for the show. That's going to put the whole Star Wars fan base in an uproar. Because honestly, I wasn't expecting. I knew episode 3 was going to bring that, but I wasn't counting on episode 4 to do anything that would be like oh crap, why'd they do this? You know what I'm saying? I wasn't
Yeah.
expecting that,
Oh, but I
but
did
then
have
they did.
yeah, I did have a question for you earlier when I
Yeah.
said that whole stuff. I was like, look,
What was that?
based on all that information I gave you about George Lucas, Dave Filoni, and J.J. Abrams, do you really think? And I'm genuinely asking. I'm not like trying to make a point. I'm actually asking. Do you genuinely think they can make the Ray movie better in any way?
It depends on how keen and how willing people are to to forgive uh to forgive Ray. That's what it depends on. To
I think so.
forgive the
Yeah.
sequel trilogy. That's what it really depends on.
Yeah,
If
because
not,
yeah, you go ahead.
no, I'm saying if not, then it's all kaput. But I think if you put Ray in a situation where she has, you know, some good pupils that she's been able to teach, and there's obviously a lot of maturity there, you know what I'm saying, in her character and her part, then maybe. But then again, that's contingent on people being willing to overlook the sequel trilogy and being willing to overlook, the flaws in her training and how her character was handled from a Jedi perspective.
Yeah.
So, are those people going to be willing? I don't think so. Simply just because a lot of what happened with her character development came at the expense of Luke as well. So the trade off was sort of there in TLJ.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in doing that, I don't think that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be willing to give this a chance. And even no matter what Dave, JJ, and them do, JJ had a chance to do it right the first time. He
He
still
did.
didn't. He didn't do it
He's
right the
like
first time.
out of all the names, like look, whatever controversial stuff you can say about George Lucas and Dave Filoni, they are a lot better off than J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams wet the bed, and he has a track record of running away from franchises whenever they fall apart that he's been a part of.
Yeah.
So it's like he doesn't have much good to prove that he can give the best of advice. It's like I said before, George Lucas is retired, and he's ultimately decided that he's not in charge anymore. So what Disney and Star Wars does is what they do, regardless of how he feels. And he said, yeah, there's a disconnect on understanding the lore. Some things got lost. He's made that clear, but he's willing to let them. He's willing to let them go their own way. Dave Filoni is a team player. He will work with the team. He'll be polite. He'll be nice, and he'll probably get something out of it, like more Ahsoka stuff, more Rebel stuff, and he'll just try to, I guess, like mediate in a way by just addressing things and letting them do what they want to, whether he agrees or not. And J.J. Abrams fumbled a lot, has nothing, doesn't have many good things to his name at this point. It's like
Yeah.
there's just Ray. It's like I don't like maybe if George was in charge, then I don't think it mattered if Dave Filoni or J.J. Abrams were around or not, because George would be calling the shots, which is what made Star Wars work in the first place. Well, if George's not in charge, whether he gives advice or not, what does it mean? He was around for, like I said, the sequel trilogy. He gave them sequel treatments. He specifically was called in to give them advice
He
for
did.
Episode 9. And according to J.J. Abrams, during the run of the sequel trilogy, George Lucas, he was constantly trying to find George Lucas for help and advice and stuff. That trilogy ultimately failed. So I think having George on the sidelines doesn't guarantee you any success. Disney could always just reject what ideas he gives them, or takes bits and pieces of it and spins it in their own way. It's like George would have to be in charge. It's just that simple. They'd have to like literally let him be in charge of Star Wars content in order for it to work. I noted this, Eric. You ever saw the Ahsoka episode in The Mandalorian season 2? The Jedi?
Yeah.
Okay, you've seen season 2.
I remember it very well.
I gotta ask, and you could answer me honestly. Did that episode feel any different to you from the rest of season 2?
Yeah, it felt very different. Yeah.
Well, Would you be happy to know that one of the factors that went into the production of that episode was that George Lucas was coaching Dave Filoni
Yeah,
and directing the episode? That's something that people. When I found that out, I was like, because before I didn't know that before. Before that, I was like, why does this episode, in structure and style, feel so different from most Disney Star Wars productions? And when I
yeah,
found out behind the scenes, George came over to Mandalorian and he was coaching Dave on the episode, on directing the episode, it made sense to me. This
yeah,
specific episode, George was coaching. No wonder it felt different from everything else that's been out.
yeah. I mean, the style of it, the shots, the way Ahsoka was portrayed, which George and Dave had always been doing this, even in the Clone Wars. The way that she was sort of betrayed and stylized as like this ancient samurai, the fights, everything about it was just different. And I knew that Dave and George, especially George, had his hand in that. And so you can always tell if you have an eye for it. You can always tell when it's somebody else versus what George wants to do, because it always has some substance behind it. It always has some meaning. Here we are. We have Evan on the show. Welcome, buddy. What is
Hey,
up, bro? How you doing?
Excited to be here. So fill me in on where we are.
We're just talking. We're just talking about the Acolyte, talking about everything Star Wars, talking about where we stand with Star Wars, the future, pretty much just everything.
I got you. I got you. So, what's been y'all's take as of late? Before I give, because I got a lot of opinions on this one, but I just want to know what y'all have been saying before I unleash on this, because I have a lot to say. So,
my opinion doesn't matter because I didn't watch the show. All I can do is give like lore explanations as to the witches and their abilities, what works, what doesn't. Aside from that, I pretty much don't know much. From what I heard, Master Soul is the only thing that works in this show. I don't know, but that's what a lot of fans are saying. So, yeah.
all right. So, Eric, but before I go off on this, let me get you on the record one more time of where you stand on the Acolyte.
As I said, and I said this on our videos that I've been releasing on IG Reels, and I've said it multiple times, but people just, some of these fans that are so angry and ready to defend the Acolyte don't listen to what I said. And where I stand with the Acolyte is that this is Disney's canon. They're going to do whatever they want to do anyway. And we knew this going into the Acolyte. We knew that there was probably going to be something that would shock and surprise fans. But, at the same time, this is Disney. They got the canon. They can do what they want. It doesn't mean that everyone is going to go along with it and agree with it, which ultimately that's where these younger fans come in. They want acceptance. They want everyone to, be quiet, about it and stop critiquing it so much. But we know that that's not going to happen simply because of just how hardcore Star Wars fans are, how many people are so dedicated to this lore. Hey, buddy. So I don't think that there was necessarily anything I could really get out of the Acolyte, given that I'm not a big High Republic fan either. But I already had a waned interest going into it, and so I wasn't going to discourage anybody else from watching it, like saying, "Oh, don't go watch the Acolyte." It's I'm not crazy like that. But I just knew it was already going to be some mess as soon as Leslie Headland came out with Disney at the Disney Celebration interview, and the cast and crew started talking. I already knew that this series was going to bring some things that were going to definitely have the fan base in uproar, and here we are. So for me, I'm indifferent to it because whether they break lore or they change things up doesn't matter. They're Disney. They're going to do it anyway. So that's where I stand with it.
I give you a high five, but we're nowhere near each other.
Yeah.
High forehead. There we go.
Well, I'm going to give my thoughts on the show very briefly because I really want to unleash on is just a rant on the Star Wars fandom in general. Because I talked to you some about this, and we'll get into this more later. But I'll save those thoughts for later. As far as the show itself goes, it's very uncharacteristic of me to change my rating on something. You know that about me. I tend to be very consistent. But The Acolyte's different. When the first two episodes dropped, I think I said 7 out of 10. I think I said the characters are interesting. The fight scenes is what really sold it for me. I thought the fight scenes were bloody excellent, very well done. The story was kind of splotchy here and there. May and Osha didn't really grab my attention very much. But I didn't see, and my main thing is, especially, I didn't see anything in the first and second episode where everybody was like, oh, this show is woke liberal garbage. This is, oh, here we go again, the woke media shoving it down our throats. I didn't see that. Not in the first two episodes. The third episode is where it began to lose me a little bit because I thought it made no sense to do a flashback episode of something we already knew. Like it had already been explained. It had already been explained to us who May and Osha were. And then they give us this backstory that added absolutely nothing to what we already didn't know. So it felt redundant. And then this last episode was just a full nothing burger. It was just a whole lot of boring up until the last 5 seconds where it looked like we were about to get another fight scene. But it ended right as soon as it was about to start. Overall with this show, my rating has dropped all the way down to a 5, borderline 4 out of 10. This is an average show at best, in my opinion. There's nothing overly terrible in this show. I'm going to stay on that, Eric. That I don't think there's nothing in this show that irks me as much as Luke Skywalker did in Episode 8, where we get this Luke who's been so heroic for all these movies, to now we see him as just a miserable old grump because he did something so unbelievably uncharacteristic of anything he would ever do. That was bad enough, but his inability to forgive himself and his whole pessimistic look on life, hearing that come from him was just nails on a chalkboard for me. I'm like, dear Lord God in heaven, this is horrific. There's nothing in The Acolyte that's brought me to that point yet. But at the same time, there's nothing in this show that's just made me go, wow, like this is unbelievable. And I had sent you a message. I don't see anything in this show. Like even Soul, as Lucas Knight alluded to, he is my favorite character. He is my favorite character in the show. But even he is not enough for me to make this show anything above a 5 out of 10. And I'm going to be honest, there's a way, I think I sent you, that there's something they could do that can make this show a 2 out of 10. Oh my, if they decide that they're going to, because one big mystery we have right now is the Sith Lord. We don't know who he is, or even if he is a Sith, because people are trying to play semantics. And I'm like, brother, it's a guy using the Force with a red lightsaber. He's killing Jedi. If it walks like a Sith, talks like a Sith, acts like a Sith, come on.
Must be Kylo Ren.
I don't know. Granted, I haven't read all the books you have. I'm not familiar with every faction of who wields a lightsaber and who doesn't. I don't have a PhD in Star Wars.
Well, we're just dealing with the movies. We're just dealing as it pertains to.
But I like to think I at least have a bachelor's. I may not have a
You deserve it, man.
I may not have a PhD, but I do have a bachelor's. Okay, but if they make this goober who's been running around with May the whole, because I feel like that's what's going to happen. This dude who's just been running around with May, helping her with the missions, I feel like he's going to be the Sith Lord. And if he is, I may not finish the show. Because at that point, it's just like, this guy is such a goober. I'm supposed to take him seriously as a Sith. Like, come on.
Well, Evan, look, I haven't watched the show, so I'm not going to vouch for it. And from what the little I've seen, it's cringe. But the question I'm ultimately having is, whether it's a Sith Lord or not, like to me, from my estimation, best guess, it's just a dark side Force user. But whether it's a Sith or not is irrelevant. The question I have is, do the Jedi find out it's a Sith? Because if it turns out to actually be a Sith, but the Jedi don't discover it, then you could argue that that matches, Ki-Adi-Mundi's line in The Phantom Menace. But if the Jedi discover it's a Sith, then that completely unravels the opening premise of the prequel trilogy. Similar to how the Empire having footage of Obi-Wan in the Kenobi show 10 years before A New Hope, when they act like he's been gone for a long fucking time, contradicts the premise of the original trilogy. So that's the ultimate question in my mind. I know a lot of people are honing in on whether it's a Sith or not, and if that breaks lore. But my ultimate question as someone who's studied a lot of Star Wars lore is, it depends on if the Jedi know. And if the Jedi know, then this breaks a major part of Star Wars lore. If the Jedi don't know, then while I still wouldn't say it's good, it at least preserves the little bit of lore they at least have at this point.
Yeah, I mean that's true. And I said that earlier, debating with some guy who came at me on IG.
Brother, you've had a lot of those recently.
The people get so in a hurry just to like think that you're trying to, spam hate on the on Star Wars, and they don't actually pay attention to like what you're saying. And I'm like, dude, you can go back and look at any of my videos. You can go back and look at my tweets. I've given Disney fair chance and fair criticism where it's due in terms of what they've done great and what they've done wrong. But you best believe I got, like, everyone's gonna bring the house when Disney does something that fans don't like. And for them to hold on, because everyone was screaming, oh, look at Andor season 2, look at the critic score, look at the blah blah blah. Everybody was holding on to Rotten Tomatoes. Oh, but now the Rotten Tomatoes, now that the audience is like, you know what I'm saying, poop juice for the Acolyte. Oh, it's different now. Oh, we're, you know what I'm saying. But I mean, you're absolutely right. There's people on both sides of this thing, and with the Acolyte, we don't know. We have to wait and see if this is a Sith, if this person is a Sith Lord. Then yes, because now people are trying to get distracted. They're talking about, oh well, the EU isn't canon anymore. Blah blah. We're not even talking about the EU. We're talking about the movies. Take all the books and all the comics away. We're talking about
Lucas canon, bitch.
Lucas canon, exactly.
Well, I mean, and that's all I've ever cared about to begin with. Like I said, I've never read the books. I know almost nothing about the EU, the Legends canon. I know almost nothing about those. So whenever I make a critique of Star Wars, I just go based off of 1 through 6, and if it deviates from that in an egregious way, then I'm kind of like, wait a minute, this is weird. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like if it follows it, I'm all for it. That's how come. I know me and you, Eric, we disagree on midichlorians, even though that's something George Lucas made. I found it to be quite a departure from when you have episode 4, 5, and 6. The Force is this mystical element that some people, have the ability to tap into, and it's really on you and your ability and how focused you are. How committed are you? How far are you willing to go to grow in this that will ultimately determine how powerful you are? But then we get to the prequel trilogy, and then it becomes, well, no, it's not actually how far you're willing to go and how powerful you can become. You're born with it. It all comes down to how many certain cells you have in your body. That's what it is. That's what makes you more or less powerful. It's a count. You see the contrast there? How one of them is more like giving more power to the individual, and it's like, oh, anyone can be a Jedi, anyone can be a hero, as opposed to, no, it's more so you're just born with it, and Anakin is special because he's got the highest midichlorian count. So that's just one example. I'm not trying to open a can of worms on that discussion. Yeah. I'm just trying to show how, like, the whole, and this is going to lead into my later rant, Star Wars has been lore breaking. George Lucas broke his own lore in that one, but lore breaking is nothing new. It's just that Disney has done it to such an extent in more egregious fashion that now we're at a point where it's a jumbled mess.
Yeah, I would say to that. I think that when Yoda talks in Empire Strikes Back, he's talking with such grandiose, and he's talking with such wisdom and such experience, to the point where it's almost like it's not even about the Force. It's about, he's talking about just life in general. Talking about those lessons to Luke that he gives. Just those are things that you take to heart, even when you're not a Jedi. You know what I'm saying? Size matters not. Focus on the moment and where you are. So many other lessons that made Empire Strikes Back so beloved. And I think Qui-Gon carried that torch too, even though he talked about the midichlorians, and gave it that scientific aspect. A lot of those lessons that he was teaching Obi-Wan and later Anakin still were sort of along the same lines. Keep your focus. Your focus determines your reality. That was one of the most powerful ones I got from Qui-Gon. And so that even if the meanings in the Force may be differing and come from a different perspective, I still think those are more moral things. This is just my view. They're life lessons, even if you're not Force. Even if you're not a Jedi, I think those are things that anyone could really live by. And now to your original point, when George did it, the only reason why I say that it's fine because it's George. If George says it, it goes. I'm not about to sit here and argue with what George has to say. If George says it, then fine. He that's his choice to make. It's his baby. He made it. So that's the only reason why I never bounce back on George about anything like that. But when it comes to Disney doing it, my standard for me has always, my thought is, when you are invited to do something Star Wars, you're a guest in somebody else's household. You are a guest in the house that Lucas built. You abide by what George did and what George established.
Oh, that house is burning now. There's holes.
Yeah, it's burning now.
Eric, I have a question.
There's soup stains on the floor.
Let's say you build a house, right?
Okay.
You live in it for 20 years. You sell it to me for $4 billion, and then you leave. Whose house is it now? It's my house.
It's still George's.
No, it's my house.
Well, hold on. Let's break that down.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
I'm not saying I agree with Disney's decisions. I am no means a fan of what they're doing. But my point is, any criticism that I give Disney, I'm always looking at George to a certain extent, because it's like, brother, at the end of the day, you sold out Star Wars. So we can talk all the time. We don't like what Disney is doing. Disney would have never had Star Wars if George wouldn't have signed his name on the bottom line. He gave Star Wars up. So, I mean, I agree. It's the house that Lucas built, but I mean, George sold the deed to that house. He gave it up. He gave him the contract. He gave him the everything.
But when I sell you this house, the foundations and everything that's in it, you still have to do everything that you want to do with that house. The renovations and all that has to be within the house, within the foundations.
I can tear the house down and build up a new one if I want to. It's my land.
Doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to work out.
I'm not saying it is, but I'm saying that's what Disney's doing now. And they have every right to do it. Do I agree with it? No. On a stance of, do I enjoy it? No. But from a stance of legality, I do hold to Sola Lucas, as I've always said. But on the flip side of it, I'm not going to be a hypocrite and act like Lucas was always consistent and he never changed anything that made people mad. It's like I told you earlier today. The battle that the sequel kids are fighting is very, very similar. It's not the same battle exactly, but it's a very similar battle to the ones that the prequel kids fought back in the day once the prequels came out and the OG fans came out saying, well, what the heck are these midichlorians? Like, the Force is just a mystical force. It doesn't need a scientific explanation. And then you've got the prequel fans coming back. Well, it's actually not that big of a deal and you're overlooking it. And then, they're like, oh, and Jar Jar's such an idiot. He's this, that, and the other. Oh my gosh. And what about Anakin and Padme's cringe love scenes? And what about this, that, and the other? Like, that's a very similar battle to what's going on now. The only difference is when George made a cringy scene, it's okay because it's George. But when Disney does it, it's not okay because they weren't the original creators of it. And I agree with you to an extent. But the only pushback I give is I can't say you're a guest in George's house because George, you're the owner of the house George built. Your name is on the deed now because George Lucas decided to up and sell the freaking house.
Right, but does that justify? Now I know you already said it, but I don't think that justifies going and technically, in a way, crapping on everything that George established. They own it. They do. You're right.
I mean, I wouldn't say they've crapped on everything he's established, but they have definitely taken fair shots at a number of things. Like, they made Han Solo essentially a deadbeat father in Episode 7 who had ran away from, Ben. Presumably him and Leia hadn't talked in a while. Luke Skywalker, I don't even want to get into. They absolutely crapped all over him. And, once again, my biggest issue with Luke is, we're running into that tired cliche we keep seeing in American heroes nowadays, which is don't fall in love with your heroes because ultimately they always end up broken, miserable, old, and alone. That's where every single one of your heroes are going to end up. Even though I love the Creed movies, they did the same thing with Rocky in those movies. Like, we see, Rocky in the first movies, oh, he's this champion, Rocky never gives up. But then, we get to Creed, and now we're introduced to this just bitter, broken down Rocky, and we just keep seeing over and over again, your heroes are going to become old and miserable. They're going to become old and miserable, no matter who they are. Don't fall in love. And personally, I'm sick and tired of that because it's like we've seen with Yoda, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, you can keep your hero a freaking hero and keep their outlook on life until they die. There's no reason you can't do that. So that was just a side tangent there. But, I mean, do I think Disney's crapped on a lot of Star Wars? Yes, but I also think they've respected it in some ways. You and I have given credit to The Mandalorian. We've given credit where credit is due with Rogue One. We give them credit for what they did with Rogue One. So I don't think Disney is hell-bent on disrespecting Lucas's legacy, but I do think that they're not very concerned with preserving his legacy, and they want to establish Disney Star Wars as Star Wars moving forward. But the problem is older fans are not biting as much. And, we can say what we want about the the ratings or the Rotten Tomato score of The Acolyte. The viewership is pretty good. It's a top 5 show in the world right now. Now you and I agree viewership doesn't make a show good, but it's still a popular show. Do I think it's a great show? No, and honestly, I can't believe I'm on here giving Disney credit. I'm just trying to keep this as objective as I possibly can because I'm always that guy that tries to see both sides of the argument. So, but let me ask you this, Eric, and I guess this goes to Lucas Knight as well. In your guys' minds, like outside of well, I guess Lucas Knight really can't answer this because he hasn't seen The Acolyte, so I guess this question goes solely to Eric. Just seeing where you think The Acolyte has really disrespected Lucas, because I haven't seen anything overly disrespectful. I think people made much ado about nothing with Kaede Mundi. I mean, like, he's clearly younger in this show. Jedi live for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. I think Yoda was like 900 some odd years when he died. So I mean, that's really nothing new. But let me ask you this: what's outside of? And I guess this would be the question that I guess Lucas Knight could answer too. Outside of George made one, Disney made the other. What's the difference in changing the Force from a mystical force to midichlorians as opposed to from midichlorians to this thread comment that we see in the Acolyte?
Well,
Knight, you can take that one. You can take it first.
sure, yeah. Nothing's really being changed in that regard. It was never changed. What I mean is that Lucas established back in the 80s, this is when the original trilogy was being made, that the Force is based on mystical energy, mysticism. Now, have either of you two seen Kung Fu movies? I'm sure you have.
Sure.
You know, are you familiar with the concept of Ki or Chi?
Mm-hmm.
Qui? Yeah, well, that's known as life force.
Right.
I don't know if you guys are Dragon Ball Z fans or any of that, but that's life force. That's what the Force is based on. Now, there is a lot of mysticism to that concept, but there's also a scientific aspect too. They're called chakras. Remember the different chakra points in your body, how they can influence certain elements?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The midichlorians are kind of similar to that in the regard that can everyone use and access the Force according to George Lucas? Yes, everyone can do it. And can everyone reach higher forms of ability due to training and skill? Yes, everyone can do that too. But the midichlorians plays with the idea that your natural potential varies in the different individuals, meaning that while everyone can use the Force and train with it and hone their skills, you know, some just have higher potential than others. So Anakin has the highest potential out of everyone in Star Wars, all the characters. But there's something you gotta pay attention to. Anakin had to be trained by several members of an order that all have less midichlorians than him. He was not as skilled as many members of this order who all had less midichlorians than him. Count Dooku, a former member of this order, kicked his ass, had less midichlorians than him. And Obi-Wan Kenobi, if we're going by EU specifically, known to have one of the lowest midichlorian counts in the entire Jedi Order, kicked his ass on Mustafar. Despite all the potential Anakin has, like he could literally become a god, because he could, being the chosen one, because he's not focused too much on skill and is more focused on sheer power, he, at the end of the day, can lose to people that have less potential than him because they're more focused on training and honing their skills than focusing on raw power. And it's the irony of Anakin. George once said that due to Anakin getting his limbs chopped off and needing mechanical aspects applied to him, his fullest potential can't be reached because he's lost too much of his organic body. So now Anakin, as Vader, only has skill to rely on when it comes to his power. And that's why he's technically a better tactical fighter as Darth Vader. So what the whole point of me bringing all that up is that Star Wars is complex and nuanced in the sense that both nurture and nature are important aspects to life, just like they're important aspects to Star Wars and the Force. Now, when it comes to the thread by the witches and the Acolyte, I haven't seen it, but it is known in Star Wars lore that different cultures have different names for the Force. So they'll call it different things. The Jedi call it the Force, and that's the common name. But you know, some other cultures will call it something else, and the witches calling it the thread, which is how they see it, actually makes sense because witches in Star Wars lore similar to witches in mythology. They don't hone energy like traditional people, like samurai, ninja, monks. They don't like pull from natural energy. They take natural energy, they corrupt it into unnatural energy, and they use that unnatural energy to, achieve things through unnatural means by their own willpower. And that's what the witches in Star Wars do. They take the Force, they turn it into a new energy source called magic, and they use that corrupt form of energy to do extremely off things. Now, I would say where this whole witch thing contradicts technically is that they establish, from what I understand, that the thread, which is what they call the Force, is how they're able to create force, force fueled babies or whatever. And the problem with that is that the Jedi can't do this. The Sith can't do this. Obviously, they failed at this. Plagueis and Palpatine. The Night Sisters, which are also witches, couldn't do this. They couldn't create life itself from the Force. They couldn't bend the Force to their will. But these random witches in the High Republic era can do this. And in my opinion, what would have made more sense is if the witches didn't necessarily learn how to create life from the thread. Instead, they learned how to create life via their magic, because, they're taking from the thread or the Force and they're corrupting it, portions of it, to make a new energy source. So if this new energy source goes beyond nature and goes into unnatural means, then I could see them using that unnatural energy to create life. And maybe it's so unstable they can't sustain it, for in the traditional natural sense. So they have to rely on magic to live, which is how it worked in the Clone Wars and other forms of Star Wars media when it came to witches. So I would say, like, where it does break lore is that it makes the Sith look like idiots, and it establishes that what everyone else couldn't do with the Force, they could do. When you could just simply establish that these witches, just basically created unnatural energy, and that's why they're doing things that doesn't make sense. I mean, that's a way to do it.
I mean, your position. I mean, I 100% agree with everything you just said. It was weird that these witches. I mean, I explained to Eric because he objected to the whole notion of the thread to begin with, and my position was very similar to yours, where I said, like, well, look, the Sith, Jedi, everybody, they all have different uses of the Force. They all call it different things. It's a battle of belief systems in a lot of ways. The Jedi see the Force as a means to bring about harmony and balance. The Sith see the Force as something to bring about ultimate power and order and compliance, their twisted version of peace. As Knight Lucas referred to it on the last episode, we all three did together. So, Eric, I think Knight Lucas actually answered my question pretty well. I want to dive into what I wanted to dive into earlier, since I was late to the party on this one. Because as you were talking earlier, Eric, I was reading some of the comments that have been left on our Instagram page, and I wanted to address a couple of them right now on the podcast, because I'm this is what's going to trigger my rant. And I'm going to use an analogy that Lucas Knight used on our last episode that I think actually really translates well into now. I made a comment that the only thing Star Wars fans like to do more than watch Star Wars is hate Star Wars. And Lucas Knight did not agree with that phrase, which I totally understand why. And he said that, it's just passion. Star Wars fans are passionate. And he used the analogy of religion. Now, I'm not going to get super religious on here. I don't talk much about my religious views on this show, and I'm not going to start today. But I want to say this much. I myself am a member of the Christian faith. I'm actually a graduate of a Christian college. Through that experience, I have had conversations with people of different faiths. I have talked to Muslims. I have talked to atheists. I have talked to Jewish people. I've talked to several people, Mormons, Jehovah Witnesses. That's 5 different faiths I've talked to. Some of those conversations have gotten more heated than others. But here's what's insane, Eric. I am able to have a conversation with somebody who has an entirely different worldview than me. We have different views on the freaking afterlife. We have different views on where we're going in eternity because we're disagreeing on these things. But we're able to shake hands and go our separate ways and be like, all right, peace be with you. Have a good day. Brother, man, I don't see that in Star Wars fandom. I can have a conversation. Understand what I just said. As a Christian, I can have a better conversation with an atheist. I'm convinced I could have a better conversation with a worshiper of Satan or anybody. Pick a faith. Doesn't matter. I am convinced I could do that conversation better than I can talk to a Star Wars fan who doesn't share the same view. It's gotten to that point. I listened to a video you did earlier talking about a Kaede Mundi, right? And this dude, you were so calm the whole video. The whole video. You never raised your voice. And some guy comments, before getting irrationally mad at something, think about it a little. There's room for something like this to make sense, just not in your preconceived notion of how the Force works. I mean, dear Lord God in heaven.
You know when the last time I heard that was? When people were defending The Last Jedi. Get that preconceived notion out of your mind of who you think Luke Skywalker is. You know, that's
We
just
didn't make this up.
Can't make it up.
What do you mean preconceived notion? That's what drives me up a wall. Like, we've got 6 movies of a preconceived notion of how someone acts, and then you're going to give us something totally different, and we're just supposed to be like, this makes sense.
No, that's the thing. They think, Eric, I've heard this argument before. They think that because Luke had a Force vision, he has had Force visions and he's been emotionally affected by them in past stories, that it makes sense that it happens in The Last Jedi. And I'm like, okay, I'm in Luke's shoes. I see a possible future while I'm training on Dagobah with Yoda and Ben about my friends being tortured. So I ignore my teachers, I take my weapons, I go on my ship, and I go to save them, from this horrible fate. But not just do I not save my friends, but I get injured, I get beat up by my father dictator, I get my hand sliced off, and now I'm dangling for my life in the clouds. Like, after all of that, my friends basically rescued themselves. I don't even get revenge for, my father, who I thought was dead. And I'm basically about to die. It's like, after an experience like that, do you really think Luke Skywalker, years later, as an old man, will just trust any possible visions or futures or dreams he senses? Do you really, I ask people, do you really think that after being taught not to trust random visions or premonitions you get, he knows what happened to Vader. He knows that Anakin became Vader and, committed genocide and helped start the Empire off of possible futures, which ironically Anakin made true by acting on that trauma. All this knowledge, he literally, in Disney canon, I'm talking about Disney canon, forget EU, forget the movies. He literally traveled the galaxy, the universe, collecting artifacts about the Jedi. He taught a lot of students about the Force and how to be Jedi. And then in this moment, he forgets one of the most basic rules about being a Jedi as a Grand Master. How old is he? What was he? His late 40s? 50s? All of that down the drain. All of it gone. And there's no valid explanation for any of it at all. I think that's shitty writing. I don't know about you guys, but I just think that's shitty writing.
Oh, at the end of the day, Lucas Knight, I tell Eric, one of the things I need from a movie, even Star Wars, is just a well-told story. That's one of my 2 key components, along with interesting characters. You give me those two things in a movie, and we're going to be just fine. Episode 8 failed horrifically on a well-told story. Like I am not against somebody falling from grace and coming back, but you better give me a good reason. Like, give me in the midst of training, Luke accidentally cut a Padawan's head off, like and he's vowed to never pick up another lightsaber. Like if you're gonna take Luke Skywalker, who convinced a mass murderer, the universal symbol for fear, a child killer, mowed down a whole room of children in cold blood, and you're gonna tell me that guy convinced the worst guy in the galaxy that he's good, but he's going to give up on his nephew after a bad dream, and you're going to expect me to sit there and be like, whoa, make this make sense. I mean, and Eric, here's another comment that I love. I just read this one too. I've never seen your other videos, but I guarantee you're one of those know nothing fans who think Anakin's birth has something to do with being the chosen one and how unique and special it was, right? Okay, first of all, anytime somebody ends a conversation with the word right with a question mark, I'm not going to give you a dignified response. Like if you come at me with, well, you do know, and then you end it with right, you're not going to get a dignified response from me. You're going to get a smart aleck remark, but I'm going to be nice here. Yeah, Anakin is the chosen one. Like that was the whole point of Star Wars. That was literally the entire story. I don't care what fan theory you've come up with, and I also don't care what EU canon may have said on the subject back in the day. This is when Lucas owned it, so I'm going to go with what he had to say on the subject. And if he says Anakin is the chosen one, which all 6 movies did point to that, by golly, he's the friggin' chosen one. The only one born of the Force that we know of throughout the 6 movies. I have the same debate whenever people try to defend bad Batman betrayals. They always show me this one comic, and I'm like, yeah, well, guess what? I don't care about that one comic. There's a reason that one comic you just mentioned is not well known. It's because it sucks. You're in the minority. That's a bad betrayal. There's a reason that some comics sell more than others. I mean, I'm sorry if I sound elitist at this point, but we have cultivated on social media a subgenre of people that just really want to contradict something. They just live, breathe, and die for the moment where they can go online and go against something that's well established and well known, and they can be that one person to get clicks and be like, I wish I had a pair of sunglasses. I'd give you the old actually, but I mean it never ends, and that's what's so tiresome for me. Thank you, Eric. Vicarious. That's what's tiresome for me about these conversations with Star Wars fans is that you can't have a respectful conversation. I mean, I've had one respectful sequel fan conversation in my life, and that was a girl I had in my class. But so this was face to face, but online, any comment I ever make where I'm like, I just don't care for what they did with Luke Skywalker. Oh, well, you're one of those people that think. I had one person come at me and say, oh, well, you're one of those people that think white men should always be portrayed in a positive light. And I'm like, huh? Talk about a freaking RKO out of nowhere on my part. Like,
you
that
poor
caught
soul.
me. That caught me totally off guard. And it's like, no, I just think characters should be portrayed how they have been portrayed. And if you're going to change them, give me a good reason. I don't think that's too much to ask, but I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy.
Nah, that doesn't make you crazy. That's fair, because when people and that's that. And to answer your second question, that's a lot. We can talk about the Kiadi Mundi situation, which, as I pointed in the video, wasn't make or break, and it didn't really matter. But it's something that people were going to point out regardless. When we talked about episode 3 and the thread and the force, those are things that are debatable. I might not agree with them. Others might not agree with them. Some might, and that's cool. I think the sole issue here comes from what's being betrayed and how it's executed as it pertains to the overall canon of Star Wars. And so, like, nobody else is gonna say it, but I'll say it because the elephant in the room is apparent. With the Acolyte, I think that there wasn't really a focus on how can we make this the best story. It was more so about, making sure that people know that this is a thing that is for everybody and that everybody can participate in this sort of, project that we're doing. And once that happened, then it just became an all-out war. I think people were out to set the jury and set the dogs on the Acolyte from the beginning.
I can't see.
And that became a big issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I'll speak as I guess, I don't know how to word this, but diversity in film has been working since the 80s. I mean, minority characters being superstars is nothing new. Now, have there been more white superstars in movies than black superstars and Asians and everybody else? Absolutely. But I mean, it's you go all the way back in sci-fi. Sigourney Weaver as Ellen Ripley is the quintessential protagonist in sci-fi horror. I would argue even more so than Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. I prefer her to him. Even now with the Mad Max Furiosa series, you have women showing out. House of Dragons, Game of Thrones. You can have, and I've made this point a million times to you, Eric, and I stand by it. Diversity in a show is not going to make it good or bad. I mean, there are so many great shows that have so much great diversity, and it's just great shows. Diversity being there is just a part of it. But shows tend to falter when you're so focused on, let's make sure we give this group enough time and this group enough time, to the point where that becomes the focus more so than, let's give the show a good story. Let's give the show a compelling villain. Let's give the show great characters in general. And I think the Acolyte is getting to a point where they're starting to get to that place where the story is taking lumps. But that might just be me. I don't know.
Yeah, I can understand that perspective. And that is where the problem comes in when you start focusing on how much of something you can put in it. For the Acolyte, I think that definitely became an issue with episode 3. Like, you can't even hide it. You knew that they were going to put, and that's the quota that has to be met. You have to have a certain amount of such and such in there. You have to have LGBTQ representation. You have to have certain percentages of things. And as soon as we saw the two witches that were intimately and romantically involved with each other, that the whole fandom knew. They were like, oh man, whatever. We're just not, I already knew. As soon as I saw it, I was like, all right, you did that.
Well,
you know what it's going to do.
I will say this. By today's standards, I mean, we didn't even see those women kiss or hug or even so much as hold hands.
Doesn't matter.
So, I mean, but my point is, by today's standards, I mean, the Acolyte isn't overly woke, but I think the Acolyte was damned from the beginning, not because of the show itself, but some not Kathleen Kennedy. What's her face, the director of the show? I forget her name.
Leslie Headland?
Leslie Headland.
Yeah, her.
Yeah.
Some comments she's made, some of which were taken out of context, Like, for example, there was a quote about R2D2 being a lesbian. I found the interview. She made a joke. She made a joke. She didn't mean that she actually wants to make R2D2 a lesbian. That was a joke, which when I first heard the comment, I'm like, surely she's joking. Like, surely that's a joke. And it was.
Yeah, it's
So,
a joke.
but there's some people out there who didn't take it as such and took it at face value and is like, oh, this woman actually wants to make R2D2 a freaking lesbian. They're going to make R2D2 a lesbian in the Acolyte. I'm not watching. So I mean that there is that element of it, and I was telling you, I'm seeing equal toxicity to a certain extent from both sides. I am seeing that level of toxicity where it's like, oh, I heard one comment about Kathleen Kennedy. Now I'm gonna go. I keep saying Kathleen Kennedy, Leslie. Now I'm gonna go review bomb the show before I even have a chance to watch it. That I'm not okay with. I'm not okay with review bombing something you haven't seen. But at the same time, I'm also not okay with the flip side of it being if you don't like the Acolyte, you're a racist, sexist, homophobic, big, like, oh, it's like I said on the last episode, there's the element of, oh, well, of course, you as a white man, you don't care about a show where the focus is on two African American girls.
That's my favorite one. That's my favorite one.
I mean, of course you don't like it. And then they will look at you with a straight face and say, "It's not meant for you." And I'm like, "But I thought it was for everybody." Wait, which is it? Is it not for me? Because I like to think I might be some part of everybody, but maybe I'm not. I don't know. I don't know how this works anymore. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that just makes me eye roll so hard my eyes are going to pop out of socket when I hear that kind of stupid stuff. Because it's like, if you, and I think you will both agree on this, whatever you're debating, politics, religion, your favorite show, if you reduce to name calling, you've lost. You lost. Because at that point, when you resort to name calling, you've shown me I don't have any merit to come back at you. I can't defend this show under the scrutiny of what you just said. So now I'm going to resort to third grade name calling. Racist, sexist, homophobic, bigot. And it's like, really? Like, and remember, Eric, we've been battling this since Ray. We've been battling this. I mean, never mind what we did an episode talking about some of our favorite female protagonists where we mentioned Furiosa, where we mentioned Ellen Ripley, where we mentioned Sarah Connor, where we mentioned Princess Leia, where we mentioned others, where we mentioned Zuri from Black Panther, Wonder Woman. We mentioned these characters and we're like, these are great freaking characters who are women. But it's like, Ray, not so much. We even mentioned Jen Erso from the same freaking cloth of Star Wars. It's Disney Star Wars.
So many legends.
And it's like, no, stop using racism and sexism to defend crappy characters. If it's a crappy character, it's just a crappy character. And it doesn't matter if it's a white man, black man, straight man, gay man, given the criticism. It's equally valid. So it's like, okay, well, what if a woman doesn't like Ray? Is that is that sexist if she says the same thing I say? Like at what point is it okay to criticize these characters? But I mean, to finish my thought for the podcast, to bring it back around to the Acolyte, you've been talking a lot about, do I think this is going to hurt Star Wars going forward? No, I think the sequel trilogy did that. I don't think there's much more to be hurt. I think after episode 9, I think, what's crazy? I think this Disney Star Wars did the same thing that the DCU did. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, where it's like, we started going one way, but then we did some controversial stuff that rubbed some people the wrong way, some people the right way. So what was our response to that? Do a complete 180 and try to appease everybody, but you end up just pissing off everybody. You go from, MOS, all right, we got a good start here. BVS, controversial film. Justice League, everyone hated it. Force Awakens, we've got a good start here. Last Jedi, the most controversial, terrible film I've ever seen. And then you get to episode 9, everybody hated it. Like the whole somehow Palpatine returned, all that stuff. And it's like, oh my goodness. So do I think the Acolyte's going to hurt Star Wars? No, because I'm of the belief the sequel trilogy's already done that. Granted, I think that Disney and Star Wars in and of themselves as separate entities have such loyal fan bases that I think any Star Wars film will make upwards of $500 million.
Do you hold that same sentiment for the Rey movie going forward? Do you think that and the Mandalorian films and the new Jedi Order film can pull out that kind of stop still?
I think because it's Disney and they have the resources to just shove films down your throat to the point where you can't escape them. I mean, Disney can market anything. I mean, that they could sell, sunglasses, that they could sell anything. It doesn't matter. But at the same time, I don't see any of those films cracking $800-900 million. I see those films at about 500, 600, 700 million, which, depending on the budget of these films, could be disappointing for Disney. But do I think these films will be the $2 billion smash hits that were The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens? Absolutely not. For one, they're not episodes. They're not episodes 10, 11, and 12. It's just these are more hey Asher, these are more standalone spin-off movies. And you look, even Rogue One, like let me look real quick. What did Rogue One make at the box office? I know Solo flopped.
Yeah, but that's only because of The Last Jedi. If I had to guess, I think if Solo maybe came
Rogue
out
One made $1 billion.
Rogue One $1 million. Oh, that makes sense.
Rogue One topped $1 billion. Yeah.
When did that come out? Before or after Last Jedi?
Pretty sure before, like a year. No, yeah, I think a year before.
Yeah, that was before.
Yeah.
It came out
2017?
2016. So yeah,
2016.
So it would have come out before the last. Yeah. So that was riding the coattails of Force Awakens, which I have said I like that one. Force Awakens didn't do anything overly terrible for me, except you gave me a villain whose his baddest scene was the first scene he's in. And from there, he got progressively less intimidating. I've never seen anything like it. But overall, my closing thoughts, because I do have to go to sleep at some point tonight. The Acolyte is what it is. I don't think anything we have said on this show is cringe rage bait, as some people on Instagram have accused you of, Eric. I think that's completely unfair and childish. And put this, you've been posting reels of it. Put this up on a reel. Put me saying this up on a reel. I'd love to get responses to this. If you're gonna come at somebody for saying something you disagree with, come at it respectfully. Like, try to be an adult and foster up better arguments than just, oh, it's cringe rage bait. Oh, this, blah, 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 blah. Like, come to it and actually be an adult and say, like, well, hey, I actually happen to like that Disney's going in this direction. Here's why. Here's why I think, Ki-Ade Mundi being in the show made sense. Because me and you had that conversation. I actually told you, I was like, well, I'm not too upset about it because, Jedi are old and yada, yada, yada. We had a delightful exchange. I mean, if you can't do that, over a show about space wizards, my God, man, what does that say about you? Like, what does that say about you that you would get so unbelievably triggered that you would just feel the need to just start rage typing? I mean, get a grip, man. So those are my thoughts.
Not anything to add to that? Anything to add to that perspective?
Oh no, I think he covered it pretty swiftly, actually. Yeah.
Well, we will definitely continue to check on Star Wars with interest and see where it takes us. So
Jay, I don't know about with interest. At least for me, I can't talk for you guys.
slight
Slightly.
slight interest. But man, y'all brought some amazing perspectives tonight, and I look forward to going back over them and posting them because that was next level. And I appreciate you guys for being here and on the show. So this was a great one. Thank you guys for tuning in to the After Hours podcast. Yet again, another great edition. Shout out to everyone on every platform. This podcast will be available where everyone can listen to it, everywhere on every platform. So I will catch you guys later. Shout out Evan. Shout out Dan. And you guys have a great, great Friday coming up. Peace.
May the force be with you both always.
Yeah. And Jesus is gonna